Dr. Kate Morgan's boots clicked against the polished metal floor as she stepped off the transport shuttle. Research Station Artemis stretched out before her, a massive structure of gleaming corridors and observation windows that looked out onto the swirling clouds of a distant gas giant. The station was beautiful in a cold, industrial way, and it represented something remarkable, a place where a dozen different alien species worked together on scientific research. Kate was the only human xenobiologist assigned here, and she felt the weight of that responsibility settling on her shoulders. She'd dreamed of this assignment for years. Getting to work alongside alien scientists, studying creatures from worlds she'd never visit, learning things that could change humanity's understanding of life itself. But as she made her way through the pristine corridors toward her new quarters, she couldn't shake a feeling of nervous anticipation. This wasn't like working in a lab back on Earth. Out here, in the depths of space, surrounded by beings so different from herself, every day would bring something unexpected. Kate had barely managed to toss her bags onto the bed in her small quarters when her communication pad started chirping. The sound was urgent, insistent. She grabbed the device and saw the message was marked as high priority. It came from Dr. Korvax, the station's lead xenobiologist. Korvax was a member of the Thraxi species, tall, reptilian creatures covered in scales that changed color with their emotions. Kate had met him briefly during her orientation, and he'd struck her as calm and professional, the kind of scientist who didn't panic easily. The fact that he was sending an emergency message made her heart beat faster. She didn't waste time. Within minutes, she was hurrying through the station's corridors, following the directions on her pad. Other personnel moved past her, some human, some decidedly not. A crystalline being that looked like walking glass nodded at her. A creature with too many limbs skittered past in the opposite direction. Kate was still getting used to the casual diversity of it all. 10 minutes after receiving the message, she arrived at Laboratory 7. 3 Thraxi scientists stood clustered near the entrance, and Kate could immediately tell something was wrong. Their scales were flickering rapidly through different shades, a sign of deep agitation in their species. They were talking in low, hissing voices, their body language tense and nervous. Dr. Korvax spotted her and separated from the group. He was taller than the others, his scales a deep green color, though right now they kept shifting to darker shades. "Dr. Morgan," he said, his voice carrying that characteristic hiss that all Thraxi had. "Thank you for coming so quickly. We have a situation and we need your perspective. Your human perspective." Kate nodded, trying to project confidence she didn't quite feel. "What's going on?" Instead of answering, Korvax gestured for her to follow him. They passed through the laboratory entrance, and Kate found herself in a space that looked like it had been designed specifically for the Thraxi. The temperature was warmer than she was used to, and the lighting had a reddish tint that must have mimicked their home world. Rows of incubation chambers lined the walls, each one containing eggs about the size of footballs. The eggs were beautiful, really, with shells that had an almost metallic sheen to them. Everything in the lab looked clean, organized, professional. This was clearly a well-run operation. But as they walked deeper into the facility, Kate noticed the other Thraxi scientists giving a wide berth to one particular area at the back of the room. There was a containment section there, separated from the rest of the lab by transparent barriers. "What am I about to see?" Kate asked, her voice quiet. Korvax didn't answer immediately. He just led her forward until they stood in front of the barrier, and then Kate saw it for herself. Inside the containment area was a hatchling. At first glance, Kate thought it was about the size of a large house cat, but that was where any resemblance to anything cute or harmless ended. She'd seen pictures of normal Thraxi hatchlings during her training. They were usually covered in bright emerald or golden scales, looking almost like tiny dragons from Earth mythology. This creature was nothing like that. It was black. Not just dark, but midnight black, like it had been carved from obsidian. And across its body were markings that glowed with their own light. The patterns pulsed and shifted as Kate watched. First blue, then purple, then an eerie shade of green that made her skin prickle. The markings weren't just decorative. They seemed to have purpose, moving in waves across the creature's body like some kind of alien language she couldn't read. But it was the eyes that really got her attention. Where normal Thraxi had 4 eyes, this hatchling had 6. They were arranged in 2 rows across its face, and every single one of them was locked onto Kate and Korvax. There was an intelligence in that gaze that was unsettling. This wasn't just an animal staring at movement. This was a thinking being, studying them just as carefully as they were studying it. Kate felt her breath catch in her throat. The creature sat perfectly still in the corner of its enclosure, making itself as small as possible. It wasn't acting aggressive or dangerous. If anything, it looked scared, defensive. but she could understand why the Thraxi scientists were nervous. Everything about this hatchling screamed wrong to them: the color, the extra eyes, those strange glowing patterns. "What am I looking at?" Kate asked quietly, unable to take her eyes off the creature. Korvax's scales darkened another shade. "That," he said, his voice heavy with something Kate couldn't quite identify, fear maybe or disgust, "is what our legends call shadow-marked. An abomination. And by the laws of my people, it should already be dead." 3 months had passed since that terrifying moment in the corridor when Whisper had escaped and Kate thought she might lose everything. But instead of disaster, something remarkable had happened. Her life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined when she first stepped onto Research Station Artemis. Her living quarters looked completely different now. Station maintenance had knocked down a wall to combine her space with the empty unit next door, creating enough room for Whisper to move around comfortably. The creature had grown so much that Kate sometimes couldn't believe it was the same frightened hatchling she'd first seen cowering in that containment cell. Whisper was now roughly the size of a small pony, with powerful limbs and a presence that commanded attention. But despite the intimidating size, the creature remained gentle, curious, and deeply attached to Kate. The intelligence was what really amazed her, though. Every day, Whisper learned something new, solved problems that should have been beyond its capabilities, and demonstrated understanding that went far beyond what any animal could achieve. Right now, Kate sat at her workstation, reviewing data from the latest behavioral tests, while Whisper played with a holographic puzzle she'd designed. The puzzle was complex, meant to challenge spatial reasoning and pattern recognition. Whisper had been working on it for maybe 10 minutes and was already close to solving it. What fascinated Kate most was how Whisper had learned to interact with technology. Those glowing patterns on the creature's body weren't just pretty lights. They were a form of communication so advanced that Whisper could actually interface with the station's computer systems. Not hacking exactly, nothing malicious or unauthorized. It was more like the creature could talk to the technology, could understand it and make it understand in return. Kate was only beginning to grasp how this worked, but she knew it was something extraordinary. Her communication device beeped, pulling her attention away from her work. Lieutenant Barnes's voice came through, professional but with a hint of concern that made Kate sit up straighter. "Dr. Morgan? You've got a visitor at the main lab. She says it's urgent." Kate glanced over at Whisper. The creature had stopped working on its puzzle and was now staring at the door with all 6 eyes focused and alert. The glowing patterns across its body had shifted to orange, a color Kate had learned meant caution, wariness. Whisper could sense something was wrong before Kate even knew what was happening. "I'm on my way," Kate said into the comm, then looked at Whisper. "You stay here, okay? I'll be back soon." The walk to the main lab felt longer than usual. Kate's mind raced through possibilities. Who would visit her unannounced? Who would claim it was urgent? She'd been so focused on her work with Whisper that she'd almost forgotten there was a whole galaxy out there watching, judging, making decisions about what should happen next. When she entered the lab, she understood immediately why Lieutenant Barnes had sounded concerned. Standing in the center of the room was a Thraxi female Kate had never seen before, and everything about her screamed importance and authority. Her scales were a deep crimson color marked with intricate gold patterns, colors that Kate knew indicated very high status among the Thraxi people. 2 guards flanked her, wearing ceremonial armor that looked both ancient and intimidating. This wasn't just any visitor. This was someone with real power. "Dr. Morgan," the Thraxi said, and her voice carried a weight of authority that made even Dr. Renix, who Kate had thought was intimidating, seem like a junior scientist. "I am High Geneticist Vectara, representing the Thraxi Homeworld Council. I've come regarding the shadow-marked specimen." Kate felt her jaw tighten. She forced herself to stay calm, to keep her voice level and professional. "Whisper isn't a specimen. And I'm its legal custodian under Protocol 7. The station commander approved it." "Yes, we're aware of the arrangement." Vectara's scales rippled with an expression Kate had learned to recognize: distaste, maybe disgust. "Which is precisely why I've traveled all this way. I've come to make you an offer, Dr. Morgan. A very generous offer. Return the creature to Thraxi custody voluntarily, and we'll compensate you handsomely. We're talking about research opportunities on our homeworld that most human scientists only dream about. Funding for any project you choose. Access to genetic databases that have been closed to outsiders for centuries. Your career would be made, Dr. Morgan. You'd be famous." For just a moment, Kate felt tempted. The offer was incredible. The kind of opportunity that came once in a lifetime. She thought about all the research she could do, all the discoveries she could make. Then she thought about Whisper waiting in her quarters, thought about the trust in those 6 eyes, thought about how the creature had learned to communicate just to be understood. That's very generous, Kate said slowly. But my answer is no. Vectara's eyes narrowed. The gold patterns on her scales seemed to darken. You're making a mistake, human. You don't understand what you're protecting. Shadow-marked hatchlings are dangerous. Our history is very clear about this. These creatures cannot be trusted, cannot be controlled. Every single one that has ever existed has eventually turned violent. It's in their genetic code. They're aberrations, Dr. Morgan. Mistakes of nature that were meant to be corrected. Whisper hasn't shown any signs of violence, Kate countered, feeling her temper rise despite her efforts to stay calm. In 3 months, the worst thing that creature has done is accidentally break some lab equipment because it grew faster than I expected. You're basing your fears on stories and legends, not on actual evidence. Our histories are not stories, Vectara hissed, her scales flashing dark red. They are records of tragedy, of death, of chaos. I'm offering you a chance to walk away from this safely, with your reputation and career intact. Refuse and I promise you, Dr. Morgan, this will not end well for you or for that creature. The evaluation chamber looked sterile and cold. Clean white walls reflected the adjustable lighting, and modular furniture sat arranged in the center, ready to be moved around for whatever tests the board decided to run. Kate stood in the observation room 1 level above, her hands gripping the railing so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Below, technicians moved around making final preparations, checking equipment, confirming that recording devices were functioning properly. Her stomach felt like it was tied in knots. This was it. Everything came down to today. If Whisper passed this evaluation, the creature would be officially recognized as a sentient being with legal rights. If Whisper failed, the Thraxi government would take custody, and Kate knew exactly what that meant. Despite all their talk of containment and study, she didn't believe for a second that Whisper would survive long in their care. Dr. Rebecca Torres stood beside her, arms crossed, watching the preparations below with a practiced eye. Torres was a member of the Xenobiological Ethics Committee, and she'd been the one helping Kate prepare for this evaluation over the past week. She'd been fair but brutally honest about what they were facing. You've prepared well, Torres said, not taking her eyes off the chamber below. But I need you to understand something, Kate. The board members reviewing this case are fair people. I know all of them personally, and they genuinely want to make the right decision. But they're also pragmatic. They understand that this ruling will set a precedent for the entire galaxy. They need to see clear, undeniable evidence of sentience. Clever animal behavior won't be enough. Whisper needs to demonstrate self-awareness, complex reasoning, emotional understanding. The creature needs to prove it's a person, not just an intelligent pet. Whisper isn't a clever animal, Kate said quietly, though she heard the uncertainty in her own voice. But I know what you mean. I understand what's at stake. Down below, in a holding area adjacent to the main chamber, Whisper paced back and forth. Even from this distance, Kate could see the anxiety in every movement. The glowing patterns across the creature's body flickered rapidly through oranges and reds. Colors Kate had learned meant stress, nervousness, fear. Whisper kept looking upward, those 6 eyes scanning the ceiling and walls, clearly searching for something. Searching for Kate, even though the observation window was one-way glass with electromagnetic shielding. There was no possible way the creature could see through it. Or was there? Kate leaned forward, watching more carefully. Whisper's patterns suddenly changed, stabilizing into a focused sequence. The creature stopped pacing and stared directly at one specific spot on the ceiling. The exact spot where Kate was standing. Whisper made a sound, a soft chittering noise that Kate had heard hundreds of times. It was a specific vocalization, one that always meant the same thing. It was a question. Where are you? Kate's breath caught in her throat. Without thinking, she pressed her hand against the glass separating her from the chamber below. Whisper's 6 eyes tracked the movement with perfect precision, following her hand even though there was no way the creature should be able to see it through the shielded glass. The patterns across Whisper's body shifted immediately to soft blues and gentle purples. The colors of relief and comfort. The creature had found her. There you are, those colors seemed to say. Remarkable, Torres breathed beside her, staring down at Whisper with new interest. It can sense you through electromagnetic shielding? How is that possible? I'm not entirely sure, Kate admitted, still watching Whisper. But I have a theory. Whisper's been in laboratories its entire life. The creature has been observed, tested, studied constantly. Maybe it's learned to recognize the technology we use. Maybe it understands one-way observation systems, understands where observers would logically stand. Or maybe those bioluminescent patterns can detect things we can't measure yet. I've barely scratched the surface of understanding what Whisper can actually do. The door to the observation room opened, and Kate turned to see the evaluation board filing in. 5 beings, 5 different species, each one an expert in their field. They would decide Whisper's fate. The chairperson was Dr. Robert Neville, a human scientist renowned throughout the galaxy for his groundbreaking work on interspecies communication. He'd written the definitive texts on how different species understood consciousness and self-awareness. If anyone could evaluate Whisper fairly, it would be him. The other board members represented the diversity of galactic civilization. A Kelthian moved with clicking steps, its body made of crystalline structures that caught and refracted the light in dazzling patterns. A Morphan floated near the back, its amorphous form contained in a specialized environmental suit, communicating through chemical signals that translation devices could interpret. A Vorton stooped to fit through the doorway, its massive frame covered in thick rocky hide that made it look like a walking mountain. And finally, Dr. Korvax, the Thraxi scientist who had first called Kate to see Whisper all those months ago. Ambassador Cole, standing near the doorway, leaned close to Kate and whispered. Korvax actually fought to be on the board. The other Thraxi representatives wanted to keep him off because he's been sympathetic to your work. But he argued that if anyone was going to judge one of his own species, he wanted to see the truth for himself. He said he owed Whisper that much. Kate felt a surge of gratitude toward the Thraxi scientist. Korvax had changed his mind based on evidence, had been willing to question everything his culture had taught him. That took courage. Dr. Neville settled into his seat and activated the recording systems. His voice came through the speakers, professional and clear. This evaluation is now officially in session. We're here to determine whether the Thraxi individual designated as Whisper demonstrates sufficient cognitive ability and self-awareness to be classified as a sentient being under Galactic Council law. The evaluation will consist of 3 rounds of testing, each designed to measure different aspects of consciousness and intelligence. Let's begin. Below, a door opened in the chamber, and Whisper was guided inside by a technician. The creature moved carefully, head swiveling to take in every detail of the new environment. Kate could see the tension in Whisper's body, the way those patterns flickered with nervous energy. But the creature wasn't panicking. Despite the stress, Whisper was staying calm, focused. Kate pressed both hands against the glass now, wishing she could be down there, could offer comfort and support. But that was against the rules. This evaluation had to be conducted without her influence. Whisper would have to face this alone. "You can do this," Kate whispered, knowing the creature couldn't hear her. "I believe in you." The first test began and Kate held her breath, watching everything depend on what happened next. 4 months had passed since the sentience ruling, and Kate had started to believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd found some kind of peace. Life on Research Station Artemis had settled into a comfortable routine. Whisper had grown to nearly full adult size now, standing taller than Kate when the creature stretched to its full height. To people who didn't know any better, Whisper looked intimidating, even frightening. Those 6 eyes, that massive frame covered in midnight black scales, those glowing patterns that pulsed across its body, it was easy to see why some people still crossed to the other side of the corridor when they saw Whisper coming. But Kate knew better. She saw past the intimidating exterior to the gentle, curious being underneath. Whisper was constantly learning, constantly asking questions through those complex light patterns, constantly surprising Kate with new understanding and unexpected kindness. The quarterly behavioral assessments that were part of their custody agreement had gone perfectly. The evaluators always came away impressed, sometimes even moved by what they witnessed. Even some of the Thraxi personnel on the station had started to warm up to Whisper, though most still kept their distance. Old fears died hard, and thousands of years of cultural programming couldn't be undone in a few months. But it was progress. Small steps forward. Kate had started to think that maybe they really had changed something fundamental, that maybe Whisper's existence was proving that fear and prejudice could be overcome with patience and evidence. Then the message arrived and everything changed. Kate was in the middle of a training session with Whisper, teaching the creature a new series of communication patterns that would allow for more complex expression of abstract concepts. It was challenging work that required complete focus from both of them. When her communication device chimed with a priority alert, Kate almost ignored it. But the priority flag meant it was urgent, so she paused the session and activated the screen. Commander Jack Reynolds appeared, and Kate's stomach immediately tightened. She'd worked with Reynolds long enough to read his expressions, and right now he looked genuinely worried. That was never a good sign. "Dr. Morgan, we've got a situation," he said without preamble. 3 more shadow-marked hatchlings have emerged in Thraxi breeding facilities over the past week. 1 on their homeworld, 2 at their colony on Arcturus 7. The news is spreading fast through Thraxi space, and from what our diplomatic contacts are telling us, the political situation is getting ugly. Very ugly. Kate felt her breath catch. 3 more. 3 more creatures just like Whisper, born into a culture that would see them as abominations, as mistakes that needed to be corrected. What kind of ugly are we talking about? Reynolds's expression darkened. The kind where religious extremists are organizing protests and calling it a curse from their ancient gods. The kind where even moderate Thraxi politicians are panicking because they don't know what it means. Is this some kind of genetic reversion? A mutation? A sign of environmental contamination? Nobody has answers, and fear fills the vacuum where answers should be. The Thraxi government is trying to maintain order, but they're not sure they can protect these hatchlings from their own people. Kate's mind raced ahead to the obvious conclusion. So what happens to them? That's why I'm calling you. Reynolds paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. High geneticist Vectara has made an official request through diplomatic channels. She wants to know if you'll take them. All 3 of them. For a moment, Kate couldn't process what she'd just heard. She wants me to take them? The same Vectara who tried to have Whisper terminated? Who fought the sentience ruling every step of the way? That Vectara? The very same, Reynolds confirmed. Apparently she's facing an impossible choice. Let extremists destroy these hatchlings, which would be politically disastrous and morally questionable even by Thraxi standards, or trust them to the human who successfully argued for one's personhood status. Politics makes for strange situations, Dr. Morgan. Vectara's between a rock and a hard place, and you're the only option that doesn't end in certain death for these creatures. Reynolds's expression softened slightly. I want to be very clear about something. I'm not ordering you to do this. Your custody agreement covers Whisper, not a whole nursery full of hatchlings. This would be entirely voluntary on your part. But Kate, if you say no, they'll die, Kate finished quietly. She didn't need him to spell it out. Without protection, without somewhere safe to go, those 3 hatchlings would be killed by Thraxi who believed they were doing the right thing, following their traditions, protecting their society from a perceived threat. She looked over at Whisper, who had stopped practicing the communication patterns and was now watching the conversation intently with all 6 eyes. The creature's patterns flickered with concern. Whisper had learned to recognize when Kate was stressed or upset, and those colors reflected worry. Not for itself but for Kate. How old are they? Kate asked. 1 is 3 weeks old. The other 2 hatched just last week. They're extremely vulnerable right now, and the facilities holding them aren't equipped for long-term care. We're talking days, maybe a week at most, before decisions have to be made. Kate closed her eyes, her mind spinning with implications. Her quarters, even with the expansion, couldn't comfortably accommodate 4 large Thraxi. The space would be cramped at best, completely inadequate at worst. Her research funding was already stretched thin just supporting Whisper, food, environmental controls, specialized equipment. Adding 3 more dependents would require additional resources she wasn't sure she could secure. And then there was the biggest concern of all. How would Whisper react to competition? Whisper had been an only child, essentially raised by Kate in isolation from other Thraxi. The creature had never had to share attention, resources, or space. Adult Thraxi weren't particularly social creatures from what Kate understood. They lived in loose communities but maintained distinct territories and could be territorial about their spaces. What if bringing in other shadow-marked individuals triggered some kind of aggressive response? What if Whisper saw them as threats? Give me 24 hours to think about it, Kate said finally. I need to do some research and I need to talk to Whisper about this. This affects us both. Reynolds nodded. 24 hours. But Kate, I need you to understand something. Whatever you decide, there's no wrong answer here. You've already done more for these creatures than anyone else in the galaxy would have. Nobody could fault you for saying this is too much. The screen went dark and Kate stood there in the silence of her quarters, feeling the weight of an impossible decision settling on her shoulders. 3 lives hung in the balance and she had 1 day to decide their fate. The Galactic Council Station was the largest artificial structure Kate had ever seen, and she'd seen some impressive things in her years as a xenobiologist. This place made everything else look small by comparison. It was a massive ring, impossibly huge, orbiting a neutron star that pulsed with regular bursts of radiation. The ring contained embassies, administrative facilities, living quarters, and meeting halls for over 50 different species. Walking through its corridors, Kate felt tiny, insignificant, like a single cell in a massive organism. She suspected that was intentional. The architects had designed this place to remind visitors that they were part of something much larger than themselves. She'd brought everyone with her. Whisper walked beside her, now fully grown and massive, standing nearly 8 feet tall when the creature held its head high. The 3 younger hatchlings stayed close to their mentor, drawing comfort and confidence from Whisper's presence. Shadow moved with careful dignity, his body language controlled and precise. His emerald green patterns were muted in this unfamiliar environment, dimmed down as if he was trying not to draw too much attention. Ember pressed close against Whisper's leg, practically hiding behind the larger creature. Her purple lights flickered constantly with anxiety. She'd always been the most nervous of the 3. And Spark, staying true to her personality, had climbed up onto Whisper's back and was riding there like this was all a grand adventure. Her orange patterns blazed bright with defiant curiosity, taking in every detail of their surroundings. "Remember what we practiced?" Kate murmured as they approached the massive doors leading to the council chambers. Her voice was quiet, meant only for her companions. "Stay calm no matter what happens. Respond to questions truthfully. Let your lights show your feelings, don't try to hide your emotions. They need to see that you're people, not property. They need to understand that you think and feel just like they do." Whisper's patterns pulsed once, a clear signal of acknowledgement and understanding. Immediately, that signal rippled through the 3 hatchlings like a wave passing through water. They'd become so synchronized in their communication over the past months that Kate sometimes felt like she was watching a single consciousness distributed across 4 separate bodies. They moved together, thought together, supported each other in ways that went beyond anything she'd seen in other species. The chamber doors opened with a deep, resonant sound that Kate felt in her chest. She took a deep breath and led her family inside. The council hearing room was absolutely enormous. Tiered seating rose up on all sides, creating an amphitheater that could hold hundreds of observers. And it was full. Representatives from dozens of different species filled the seats, all here to witness this historic moment. Kate spotted news drones hovering throughout the space. She counted at least 20 different galactic news networks recording everything. Whatever happened here today would be broadcast across the entire galaxy within hours. The council itself sat at the highest tier, 7 beings representing the most powerful and influential species in the galactic community. Today's presiding judge was Chancellor Vornis, a Kelthian whose body was made of crystalline structures that caught and refracted light in dazzling, almost painful ways. Looking directly at Vornis was difficult. The light seemed to bend and shift around the being in ways that hurt Kate's eyes. On one side of the central floor sat Kate's legal team. Leading them was Commander Andrew Bennett, widely considered the Coalition's finest Xenorites attorney. He'd taken their case without charging anything, working pro bono because he believed in what they were fighting for. He'd told Kate in private that this was the most important civil rights case of our generation, and that winning it would change the fundamental nature of how galactic society viewed consciousness and personhood. On the other side of the chamber sat the Thraxi delegation, and Kate's heart sank when she saw how many of them there were. High geneticist Vectara stood at the front, but she wasn't alone. Behind her sat at least 30 Thraxi officials, all wearing their formal governmental robes. And all of them were displaying scales of unified crimson, a war color among their people, worn when they believed they were facing an existential threat to their culture. Bennett leaned close to Kate and spoke quietly. "They're making this about more than just 4 individuals. This is a referendum on their entire species' identity, on 10,000 years of cultural history and tradition. If we win today, it undermines everything they've built their society on. Every story they tell themselves about why they eliminated the Shadow Marked. Every justification for what they did." "And if we lose?" Kate asked, though she already knew the answer. Bennett's expression hardened, his jaw setting with determination. "If we lose, being different becomes a crime punishable by death. Not just for Whisper and the hatchlings but for anyone in the galaxy who doesn't fit into neat categories. The precedent would be catastrophic." He looked at her directly. "We don't lose. We can't afford to." The hearing began, and Chancellor Vornis's voice resonated through the chamber, somehow both musical and authoritative. "This council is now in session. We are here to determine the legal status of shadow-marked Thraxi individuals and whether they should be granted full personhood rights under galactic law. High geneticist Vectara, you may present your case." Vectara stood, and Kate had to admit the Thraxi was compelling. She moved with confidence, spoke with authority, and presented her arguments with the skill of someone who'd spent years in political and academic arenas. She began by displaying historical records, ancient Thraxi texts that described shadow-marked individuals and their unnatural abilities. She showed surveillance footage from centuries ago, claiming it depicted violent behavior from adult shadow-marked Thraxi. She presented genetic analyses that argued their DNA was fundamentally unstable, prone to mutation and unpredictable development. This council must understand something crucial, Vectara argued, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the massive chamber. The Thraxi people did not eliminate shadow-marked individuals from cruelty or prejudice. We did it from necessity, from survival. These creatures possess abilities that make them impossible to integrate into any functional society. They can manipulate technology in ways we don't fully understand. They can influence electronic systems, communicate instantaneously across distances, coordinate actions in ways that no government can monitor or control. How can a civilization maintain order when some individuals have such unchecked power? She gestured toward where Kate stood with Whisper and the hatchlings. Dr. Morgan has done admirable work studying these specimens. Her dedication is commendable. But sentiment and emotional attachment should not override legitimate safety concerns. These 4 individuals represent a potential threat not just to the Thraxi people, but to any species that relies on technology for their civilization to function. They must be contained in secure facilities, studied under proper scientific protocols, and prevented from reproducing. It's the only logical course of action. The chamber erupted in murmurs, voices rising in dozens of different languages. Kate felt Whisper tense beside her, the creature's massive body going rigid. The patterns across Whisper's scales flickered rapidly with distress. The colors were chaotic, jumping between anxious oranges and fearful reds. Kate placed her hand on Whisper's side, feeling the warmth of those scales, feeling the rapid pulse of the creature's heartbeat. "Steady," she whispered, keeping her voice calm and reassuring. "I know that was hard to hear. But our turn is coming. Soon everyone will hear the truth."